Imagine a giant castle with high stone walls and heavy iron gates. This is Buckingham Palace. For a very long time, it was very, very quiet. It was so quiet that the silence felt like a heavy blanket. People outside the gates were whispering. Reporters held their microphones and wondered what was happening inside. Experts who know everything about kings and queens tried to guess the secret. The whole world was asking the same question. Why are Archie and Lilibet being treated differently? Archie and Lilibet are the children of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. In the past, every royal baby was welcomed with big parties and special pictures, but these two children were missing. They weren't at the big royal parties. They weren't in the official family photos that hang on the palace walls. They weren't part of the special royal traditions that have happened for hundreds of years. No one from the palace would say why. It was like a cold wall of ice had been built around the kids. But then something changed. Behind those big gates, people started moving. It wasn't just talk or gossip this time. It was official business. People who work inside the palace said that important papers had been written. These papers were signed and sealed with wax. They weren't just letters saying, please follow the rules. They were final orders. These documents were made to change who Archie and Lilibet are forever. When these papers started moving, it was like a giant storm began to blow. The message was very tough. It said that Archie and Lilibet could no longer call themselves royal. The palace wasn't doing this because they were mad or wanted to be mean. They were doing it because of the rules. The monarchy has a very old rule book. It was written a long time ago when kings thought they were chosen by God and royal blood was more valuable than gold. To understand why this happened, we have to go back in time. The year was 1917. The world was at war and things were very scary. Inside the palace, King George V had a big problem. The royal family had too many relatives in other countries and it was making people confused. To keep the British crown safe and special, he made a new rule. This rule is called the Letters Patent of 1917. On paper, the words look boring and simple. But inside those lines was a law that would change the family for the next 100 years. This law said exactly who could be called a prince or a princess. There were three main rules you had to follow. First, you had to be from the real royal family line. Second, your birth had to be written down and checked by the crown. Third, you had to join the Church of England in a special ceremony called a baptism. There were no shortcuts. You couldn't skip a rule just because you were famous. These rules made sure that royal titles weren't just toys. They were legal and sacred. For a long time, every royal baby followed these rules perfectly. But then, a baby came along who was a bit different. When baby Archie was born in 2019, everyone was happy. There were smiles and happy news stories everywhere. It looked like a normal royal birth, but deep inside the paperwork, something was wrong. On Archie's first birth certificate, his mom was listed as Rachel Meghan Markle. That was her normal legal name. But a few weeks later, that paper was changed in secret. Her name was rubbed out. In its place, they wrote, Her Royal Highness the Duchess of Sussex. No one explained why they did this. It was just a quiet change in a very important book. When people found out, it caused a lot of trouble. Meghan said the palace made her do it. The palace people said they didn't. Everyone was pointing fingers at each other, but no one had proof. The real question was bigger than a name. Was this change made to make Archie look different in history? Once you change a royal birth paper, you aren't just changing a name, you are changing history. This small change made people start to doubt things. For a long time, royal records were very strong. But now there were cracks in the walls. The system that protected the royal blood for hundreds of years was starting to break. And when a crack starts in a building, it's only a matter of time before the whole thing starts to shake. When Archie was born, the cracks were small. But by the time Meghan had her second baby, the cracks were huge. In June 2021, a new baby girl was born. She was born in California, very far away from the palace and the old church bells of London. Her parents named her Lilibet Diana. This name was very special. Lilibet was the Queen's secret nickname when she was a little girl. Diana was the name of Harry's mother. It should have been a huge royal celebration, but it wasn't. There were no palace gates opening for the news. No royal doctors came out to say the baby was healthy. No official paper was put on the easel outside the palace for everyone to see. Instead, the news came from California in a bright, happy message from Meghan and Harry's own team. To people who watched the royals, this sounded like a giant clap of thunder. For hundreds of years, every royal birth followed a script. A royal doctor had to sign the paper to prove the baby was real. The palace had to check every detail. Pictures of the baby had to be put in the royal library so people could see them in the future. This wasn't just for fun, it was for proof. It proved the child belonged to the crown. But with Lilibet, the palace said nothing. There was no royal witness and no royal seal. Inside the palace, that silence meant one thing: this baby didn't belong to the crown's official list. Later, Meghan talked about Lilibet's baptism in California. She said it was a beautiful day with friends and family. They shared photos and told the world how happy they were. But behind the thick walls of Buckingham Palace, things were not happy. A baptism is more than just a party for a baby. It is a promise that the child belongs to the Church of England. The king or queen is the leader of that church. If a child doesn't have that link, the royal family sees them as unrecognized. People whispered that the California ceremony wasn't signed by the Church of England. In the world of royal rules, that means it didn't count. To most people, that sounds like a small thing, but to the monarchy, it was like a giant earthquake. Without that church connection, Lilibet wasn't just outside the church. She was outside the chain that connects royals to the throne. Her parents saw a happy day. The palace saw a broken rule. Because of this, the baby who was celebrated in America was ignored by the crown in Britain. It was like two different worlds. One world was sunny and happy in California. The other world was cold and followed strict rules in London. For Meghan, these problems weren't just about papers or church laws. They were about who she was. From the day she married Harry, her life was tied to being a royal. She wasn't just an actress anymore. She was a duchess and the mother of royal children. That title gave her power. It was the reason people wanted to see her interviews, read her books, and buy things from her new brand. Her message was always, "I am a woman chosen by the crown." But the crown was slowly taking that back. Without the palace saying her children were royals, her whole image started to shake. She risked becoming just another famous person, not a royal. And for Harry, who had left his job for freedom, this must have been very scary. If the palace wouldn't recognize his children, what did that mean for him? The silence from the palace was now very loud. The system that used to welcome Harry's family with trumpets was now closing its doors. The old rule book was about to be closed on Harry's part of the family. Late at night, Harry would pick up the phone. He wasn't calling as a prince, he was calling as a dad. He talked to the family he had left behind. He begged them to change their minds. He wanted his children to stay part of royal history. He thought that even if he moved away, his children would still be part of the royal family tree. But the answer he got back was as cold as ice. One person allegedly said, "This isn't about how you feel. This is about rules and the future of the crown." In those words, Harry heard the voices of all the kings from the past. The crown is not a normal family. It is a giant organization, and giant organizations don't change their rules just because someone is sad. For Harry, it was like watching someone cut the branches off his own family tree. The branches with his children's names were being dropped to the ground. Then came the moment that changed everything. The papers were finished and signed. There were no big speeches or cameras. It was just ink on a page and a quiet worker doing what history commanded. Archie and Lilibet were going to lose everything that connected them to the royal palace. First, they would have no prince or princess titles. Second, they would have no special jobs and ceremonies. Third, they would not be in the line to become king or queen. Fourth, the palace would not pay for their protection or put their names in the royal records. This sounds like a list of chores, but in the royal world, titles are everything. They decide who is remembered in history and who is forgotten. So line by line, their names were taken away. Prince Archie became just Archie. Princess Lilibet became just Lilibet. This wasn't a timeout or a break. The palace didn't push a pause button, they pushed the delete button. The people who keep the royal records began to update everything. The computer files were changed. In the spots where their titles used to be, there was now only blank space. It was the quietest way to erase someone from history. There was no big fight or yelling. There was just nothing. Sometimes, having nothing there says more than any words could. For years, people called Meghan and Harry royal rebels. They told their story to everyone. They made movies and wrote books. They stood up against the palace. But now the truth was very sharp. You can only be a rebel if the crown still says you're part of them. The monarchy knew this. They didn't fight back in public. They didn't say mean things in the news. They just waited. When the time was right, they acted with perfect aim. They took away the names, the titles, and the official status. The message was clear. The crown stays strong because it follows its own rules, not because of famous people. For Meghan and Harry, this was the coldest thing the family had ever done. The family they tried to change had decided to just erase them instead. Today, Archie and Lilibet will grow up in California. They will have lots of sunshine and laughter. They will have parents who love them very much. They won't feel the cold rules of the palace. But when the history books are written in the future, their names will not be there next to the crown. That empty space where their names should be will tell a big story. It will say that the crown cares more about rules than feelings. It cares more about the family line than love. It cares more about the past than the people. For the palace, the books are now clean. The names that didn't fit are gone. For Harry and Meghan, it is the end of their royal adventure. Because once the crown erases you, you aren't a rebel anymore. You aren't living in another country as a prince. You are simply gone. They are no longer part of the giant story that has been told for 1,000 years. They are just a family living their lives, while the castle gates remain closed behind them, silent and still. The story of the royal rebels has ended not with a bang, but with a quiet click of a pen and a name disappearing from a page forever. From now on, they are just people watching the palace from the outside, just like everyone else. The golden dream of being a royal is over, and the reality of a normal life has begun. It is a story of a family that chose a different path, only to find that the path they left behind was closed for good. The silence of the palace finally has an answer, and that answer is final. Archie and Lilibet are regular children now, and the royal world will move on without them, keeping its secrets and its rules safe behind the high stone walls.